Hello, 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 warriors. This is Tina Salinas from We Are the Voice for the Silenced and Afflicted. I know it's been quite some time, and I do apologize. We are here with guest Dennis. He is having an awful, awful time with the Family Court and CPS, along with them threatening jail time to his wife for her trying to protect her child from systematic abuse. I'll sum it up that way. Before we start the show, I would like to remind people to go to care2.com and sign Malachi's Law, which is designed to protect domestic violence and child abuse victims. We know all too well the family court enjoys condoning bad behavior and abuse and fails to protect, which is the very oath that they took to keep family together. Without further ado, thank you so much, Dennis, for joining the show. And I just applaud you for the great amount of strength that you encourage that you have put forth to trying to keep your family together and standing up for what's right. It's awfully hard, and people fail to realize that if you don't do it, nobody else will. We do have a lot of advocates and help online, but sometimes it's a little bit easier said than done to be behind closed doors and working with evil face to face. So, again, thank you so much for being a part of the show, and I will let you tell your story.
Start off with that if I would have known then what I know now, it would have made a huge difference. But my situation, my family situation's been going on 5 years now. And it, believe it or not, all started with one simple husband and wife spat. No domestic violence, no. Oop. Sorry, the screen went funky for a second there. But no domestic violence, nothing more than just a husband and wife argument. And it just, just took off from there. But anyways, it all started back about July 17th, 2000 and I believe 17 it was. It was July 2017. My wife and I took in three of her cousins, second cousins. There were three girls. The first two, the oldest one was mauled by a pit bull. All the girls were living in a drug house. They had rakes for clothes, infested with lice. It was just a really bad situation. Their
How
mother
long did, I'm sorry, Dennis, how long did this go on for before you guys were notified that these kids were living in this, situation?
we were last on the list. Nobody else in the family would take the girls. So we were close to my niece, their mother, their mother was real young. We spent a lot of years with her. But when she got older, we kind of lost track. But she wound up going to jail for 8 years for drug charges. And we got called to see if she called us, begging us to take in the three girls. The youngest one wound up staying for like another 6-7 months with their it was their mother's boyfriend. He wasn't the biological father, but he wound up dying from an aneurysm from drug abuse. And the three girls were being watched by his mother, and she couldn't take on the three girls. She tried to hold on to the youngest one because she was really attached to the girls. We took the two oldest girls. Like I said, the oldest one had a lot of behavioral issues. She got mauled by a pit bull. They were living in a drug house. When we came to pick them up, like I said, they had rakes for clothes. They had no shoes.
Can I ask how old the age range of the little girls were?
The youngest one at the time was about 5 or 6, and then the second oldest was about 8 years old.
So
And the
basically, prior to you guys getting them with such a young age, they seem to already have been traumatized quite a bit then.
oh yes, they were definitely. But we wound up taking it slowly, and we wound up taking the girls in, taking them back. We picked them up in Florida, took them back to where we were living at the time in Wisconsin, and we didn't have any custody paperwork. So I went down, knowing what I was doing, but I went down to DCF in our hometown and asked for their help to get guardianship, legal guardianship of the girls, because we had no legal paperwork for the girls. So,
Pretty sure that's where all your trouble began, huh?
yeah, we can kind of look at it, but we went to them. They helped facilitate temporary guardianship, and we went. They were in our life for like almost a full year, constantly over in our house, talking to the kids. And like I said, we took it slowly with the girls. They never knew us. It was just, but we have two sons, and it kind of helped with the transition for the girls to have our two sons around. Our oldest son is autistic, and our youngest son at the time had a bad speech disorder. We later found out that he had hearing problems that was causing his speech disorder. But anyways, so Waukesha County, our hometown, DCF, they facilitated the guardianships, and we got the three permanent guardianships. The younger girl came up. I'm sorry, the younger girl came up after about 6 months, and we took her in with the other two. But we got guardianships for all the girls, and then at the time we were living when we took in the girls, we were living in a 2-bedroom apartment building, and the lease was almost up, and we couldn't renew the lease where we were at. So we looked for houses all over the place, and having 5 children, it was a task.
So
So
within you getting guardianship, I'm sorry, Dennis. Um,
okay.
within you getting guardianship and DCF being involved, did they offer services knowing that you guys were in a two-bedroom home, and now this is going on just not two children but five children in the home, or did they kind of just say here you go and let you deal with it?
And they were pretty much here you go. They they kept, but towards the end when we got permanent guardianships, we noticed that the social worker, our case was closed and everything. The guardianships were awarded. The caseworker, for some reason, kept coming around, trying to talk us into doing kinship care for the girls. And we wound up moving down south. My wife's from northern Florida, and all of her family's down there. And it was easier. We had some leads on houses down where she grew up in. So we went down, and we were staying in a extended stay in Dothan, Alabama. And we had I was paying $2,000 a month for 2 big suites. There was enough room. Everything was provided for. Had full kitchen, two full bathrooms, 2 big screen TVs, on-site laundry. just everything was and was considered residential housing because if you could stay there like and just live there permanently, that's what your choices were. But we wound up having a we got to Alabama and the girls when the youngest one came, the two oldest girls made the transition pretty easily, but the youngest one had horrible developmental delays. Uh, she had was severely acting out, and it was just increasing the behaviors of all the children. So things were stressful, and then my father-in-law wound up having a heart problems. He had to go in for heart surgery. My mother-in-law, she had broken her hip, and she was rehabilitating. So we had a lot of things going on, and we had a house wind up being set up. We're gonna when the incident and everything occurred, we were moving into our new home in about 2 weeks. But anyways, my wife and I we got in an argument, and the kids weren't present, and it was stemming from the stress of everything, being in transition, and somebody had called the police, and because we had 5 special needs children, and I'm I should announce that in the very beginning. I'm physically disabled, and at the time I was having a lot of problems with my disabilities. So they saw that I was disabled. We had 5 special needs children, and a lady had come by. First, the police had come, and they didn't do anything. They left the premises. Then a CPS worker just said he would happen to be helping somebody else in the building, and he came by and he cleared everything. He didn't see any problems going on or threats. And shortly after he left, about a couple hours later, right around the time we were cooking dinner, another CPS worker showed up by herself, and she said that she was there to evaluate the situation. So she watched us cook dinner, have dinner. She talked to the kids. She watched me get them all ready for bed. Just the usual routine. And she left our room after a couple hours. Left the residence, went out and called her boss. Came back and handed me a card. She says, "I don't see anything wrong. It's just a spat." She said, "Hand me your card." And she says, "Call me when you tell your wife to call me when she gets home, so I can make sure everything's okay."
So is this kind of a typical procedure for them to kind of sit around for a couple hours and watch people while they're kind of living their daily life? Is this what they've done before in the past?
Sorry, I'm getting a little bit more comfortable now. It's a lot of post traumatic stress from the issues and reliving this stuff. But my wife, which was curious enough, and I will say that to people who watch out there, CPS is like used car salesmen. They'll go around homeless shelters, hospitals, schools. They look for opportunity and they don't need much. But if you wind up being in any type of crisis, they're all over it. And my wife wound up remembering seeing the social worker that was coming after the ones that I talked about. She saw her up to like a month and a half, several times checking out our plates. My wife thought she was a supervisor, like a maid supervisor, but she recognized the face and stuff.
Oh,
But
they tend to do that. The stick around and basically stalk and harass somebody so they can build a case. I know we've seen that plenty of times.
yeah, so the next morning, I wake up and I answer the door, and there's 2 social workers and 4 police officers at the door. They didn't have a warrant or judge's order, but at the time I've never dealt with CPS, so I didn't know as much of the difference. But they came in, and right at the time they were coming in, my wife had come back. She had stayed the night over by her family's to kind of recover from our little bit of a spat, let things kind of calm down and everything. But she came back, and the minute she came through the door, the 2 social workers attacked her, demanding her to take a drug test, told her she looked like she was on drugs. They were threatening her, they were going to take the kids. She didn't cooperate. And my wife had took the test. She was just speechless, scared, not knowing what the heck was going on. And she took the test and she left. Said she was going to go take. They told her to go. It was like 2 streets from where we were staying. They said that she would take the drug test at. But she wound up going and trying to get her family involved because she didn't know what to do. I mean, we've never dealt with anything like this before in our lives. So the minute she left, the social worker, I heard her say, well, she just abandoned the children. And then they tore into me. They started saying that our place that we had for the children there was unfit for children, that there was a history of prostitution and drugs at the extended inn that we were at. And I come to find out a little bit after that CPS actually put families, and at the time that they deemed our residents unfit for children, there was 30 some families living in the same residences, and CPS placed them all there.
Sounds
But
like a setup.
they wound up telling me, they told me I had, at first they wanted me to take 5 special needs children. I think that was a setup. 5 special needs children and me on a Greyhound bus across country. They claimed that the children were still Wisconsin residents, and I was to take them back to Wisconsin, where they were threatening me that they would take the kids into their custody. And when they told me to take them on a bus, I was at the time in an electric wheelchair, and I said, I can't do that. There's no possible way. So they then told me I had 2 hours to find somebody to come get me, or they were going to take the children into custody. Like I said, if I knew now what I knew back then, I would have told them, you know what, take them and I'll see you in court. But I was scared, so I got a hold of my brother, and they wound up placing a guard, keeping my wife from coming back. They said that she was not allowed anywhere near me or the children. They were claiming that our spat was domestic violence and that she was an aggressor.
So I have a question real quick. With all this happening and transpiring, like, was there ever like a court order issued? I'm pretty sure there wasn't, but it seems like there was so many illegal activities going on, not only threatening you, but the safety of your own children, and your family members. Um, did you guys ever happen to feel that you should have called the cops or involve other people to see what's going on? I mean, these people are just coming out of the blue saying, making threats
Well,
in order not.
yeah, you just hit it right on the head. CPS operates so, and I've been an advocate for 2 years, very heavily, and for advocating for a little less than that for 5. But CPS, they intentionally come with police officers. They live to turn your life upside down from the moment they get there. And we
Yeah.
were just stunned. in shock, hearing the words, "We're taking your children from you." And the police were there, and we're like, it was just a crazy situation.
A lot of people don't realize that the police being there is just an intimidation tactic that CPS
Right.
uses, unless they have an actual written warrant with the judge's name on there, a legit warrant. Really, there's no reason for the police to be there. It's just to intimidate people, and a lot of people don't know that. Just like a lot of people don't know that they don't have to speak to CPS and open their doors. But again, like you said, what do you do when you're face to face with the devil himself and they're threatening to take your children and you're against all odds and you are not educated at the time and naive, to the situation? And it's terrible because a lot of us unfortunately have to go through these situations to educate ourselves, before we're really told, this is what to do and not to do. They're not going to hand us a brochure and say, here you go, we're going to protect you from protecting it, yourselves against us. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we'll do three quick pointers that you just pointed out to anybody listening out there. One is you don't have to let CPS in. They have to show a judge's order or a warrant and if they want to check and see if the children are okay, you can take them to a window and let them see. But without a judge's order or warrant, they're not allowed into your residence. Second thing that I can tell people that's watching out there is record from everything from the get-go. Open your cell phone, click record, and tape everything that's going on.
And record
Yeah,
those credentials too. Don't forget the
I was just
credentials.
about to say that. That was the third thing. Record, ask to see the officers' badge numbers, ask for the officers' badge numbers, look for ask to see identification from the social workers. And if they have a warrant or judge's order, check the signature matches. I've had people who one of the individuals that I worked with for quite some time, they came with the wrong names and everything on the judge's warrant to take his kids from him. So it wasn't even his name and his two children's names were wrong. So
Yeah, they consider it legally abducting, but I guess even when they're stupefied doing that, they can still, get themselves in a world of ton of crap, especially when the names don't match or you got a falsified judge's signature. I've seen that too, where the police will come back with CPS and it's not even the police, it's the CPS workers that have this paper that was falsified stating it was a judge's handwriting and it wasn't. They really try hard to go ham on taking people's children and it's the majority of the people's children that are taken are the protective parents. They're not even abusers, they're the protective parents.
definitely, but I'll move quicker, so I don't allow anybody to sleep. But it's a monster of a story. But anyways, I wound up getting a hold of my brother. I had to beg for my brother to come down and get us. We lost 75% of everything that we owned. I had to get the kids ready in less than 8 hours to leave on a cross country trip. And they placed a guard in our room. And there was guards in our room from the time CPS left to the time my brother came. My wife tried to come back because it was her legal right to see us and have communication with us. And the guard went after her. She had to flee from the scene. But yeah, so they kept everything under wraps. And my brother came and got us and took us back up to Wisconsin. Well, again, I had to leave my only mobility, which was my electric wheelchair. CPS gave me a broken down push chair to take cross country with the 5 special needs kids. So my electric wheelchair was like my mobility, how I took care of the children and everything. So we got up to Wisconsin, and you just had hit it on the head. It was a big setup. Later on, when we we got the discovery. We seen that Waukesha, a social worker that handled all the same people that handled our guardianships, and just less than 45 days, I think it was earlier, granted us custody without any restrictions or anything with all the children. But it's found in discovery. Waukesha had found the children because we put the children in a school down south, and Waukesha found out where we were at. And they set this whole thing up, I believe, at 110%. My own family turned on us. When I got up there, they basically dropped me and the kids on the street. We were homeless. My wife wasn't allowed to come. She was trapped down south. And I had to find places for the kids and me to stay quickly. My niece could only take the kids for like 3 days. She took the 3 girls, and my 2 sons and I stayed with a friend. And over the next 3 or 4 days, I tried everything. And they told me I had to report to CPS when I got to town up in Waukesha, up in Wisconsin. And I went, and I didn't know it at the time. Like I said, that was the setup. So I hunted down the social worker that we knew from the girls' guardianships. And she looked at all the paperwork, and she didn't start anything. She said that she saw nothing more than a husband and wife split, and that they weren't going to get involved. Well, we wound up not being able. I wound up. She gave me a call a couple days later because I told her the 3 girls with their behaviors and just me, I could not take care of all 5 kids on my own. That I needed assistance. So she called me up like the second day that we were back in Wisconsin. She said that quickly, she said she had a family who would temporarily take the girls until this got all sorted out. So again, I signed temporary, which was illegal because both my wife and I had equal custody rights. And I wound up signing the girls into foster care temporarily. And
So technically, they needed both of your signatures, right?
yes, but it was all part of the plan. But the youngest one, that was the true thing too. The youngest one, I didn't even have any guardianship or custody of. My wife's cousin, the girl's mother, signed temporary custody rights over to my wife. So she was actually kidnapped out of the state of Alabama, away from her legal guardian, and sent back to Wisconsin. But anyways, after about 4 or 5 days, I burned every resource I had. I just bought groceries and everything down in Alabama before this all had occurred. So I was floating, like I had 2.5 weeks to my next payday, and I had like maybe $100 to my name. So after about 4 or 5 days, things fell apart, and I wound up getting a hold of my wife, and I told her, you know what? They're not doing anything. Come get us before the girls, because the girls were coming back that day, and CPS was coming to take them into custody. And I just said, you know what? We'll deal with it back down in Alabama. I said, this is crazy. So my wife, before she could get up there, CPS was alerted by one of my family members that I called my wife to come get all of us. And they were there quickly to get the girls that day. And they told me that they were taking the girls into foster care temporarily, and while this all got sorted out, and they were going to leave the boys with me. So my wife had shown up, and they claimed that she wasn't allowed to see the kids, be near me or the kids down in Alabama. She was deadly and on drugs and psycho, but she
Was
let
there ever an order of protection put into place that they keep claiming that,
they
you know,
they
she's not allowed?
they implemented what they claimed was a safety plan, but none of the children were listed on it, and I was the only thing. My name was the only thing on the safety plan. And as you know, safety plans are only good in the state that they're made out in. Once you cross the line, state lines, the safety plan by CPS is no longer enforced.
So they shouldn't have had any jurisdiction then within that state.
And on top of it, like I said, they only are allowed to institute a safety plan if the children are going to be on it. They have to open up an investigation or an inquiry at least to institute a safety plan. And none of the children were listed. I was the only one on the safety plan. So it was really ridiculous. But when you're freaking out and all, they've created havoc in your life, you're not thinking clearly, and you're not making sound choices. But
Well, you're in a panic, and the only thing you're thinking of is, you know, protecting your children and making sure that they don't go to the state. So it's definitely understandable.
so yeah, so from there, they said that they were leaving the boys. They left my wife go with me and the boys. We spent the night together, and she's supposed to be this dangerous domestic violence and on drugs and all this crazy stuff. But let her leave with me and the kid, my two boys. And we went to court the next day for the girls. And when we got to court, she told my wife and I to take the children to lunch, and when we come back, we'll talk. So when we got back, it was near court time. She told me that they'd watch our two boys in the playroom while we handled business in court. They were doing us a favor. They were going to watch the kids. And we got
This is a
through.
this
Yeah,
is a CPS worker telling you to watch. This is
the
wow.
CPS workers. When we got
Wow.
into court, towards the end of the hearing, they announced that they took the two boys into custody behind our back out in the playroom, and took them into custody without ever notifying us.
And in what grounds? You guys were in the courtroom while this happened. On what grounds did they base that they took the two boys?
They said that, oh, it was, like this one. They tried to make me, I forgot to tell about it, but they tried to make me take out, my family tried to make me take out uh, um, uh, sorry, my mind, a restraining order on my wife. And when I had said that my family dumped us on the street, it was because they had their own motives. My sister just wanted my oldest son, and my one younger brother wanted both of my sons. And my other brother, he was willing to take my oldest son only. And they wouldn't take any of the girls, agree to take any of the girls or anything. They tried to force me to take a restraining order. And the DA at the time heard the situation when I was talking to the courts about the restraining order. I didn't want to take it out. I was explaining to them the situation. And the DA came out and started to hound me about what I'm going to do with the boys because I'm disabled and stuff. So they wound up, when I left there, They wound up calling, supposedly, this is a CPS's story, that my oldest son had a over wet diaper, and they feared that I wouldn't feed the kids lunch that day. And that was the reason they gave to take our two oldest.
So they were predicting the future already. How interesting.
So it was just nuts and crazy. But
Well,
we took it for a whole month. We didn't see our children at all. We weren't allowed any visitation. They split my wife and I up, said that she couldn't be around me or the children. And we waited. I saw the kids in about a little bit around a month's time. My wife didn't get visitations with the kids until like almost 6 weeks after they were taken in.
and real quick for people to understand is when your children are taken, they're not going to tell you this, but you do have a right to appeal that into court.
That's
Because
72.
at that point in time, they should have been able to provide any proof or substantial proof that the children were any threat or danger, either with you or amongst your wife. But it seems as if they fabricated so much up, and it just doesn't even seem it's so odd. It's just so odd on how they took them and the story that they said to take them.
Yeah, you just hit it on the head. It's called, I believe, in some states it's called a 72-hour hearing, but in other states it's something else. But yes, it's a time period. It's one of only two times that you can prove
Right.
your innocence with CPS. The other one is the fact finding or adjudicatory hearing, where people
And
watch.
that's typically, yeah, that's typically after you have to go through, right? After you have to go through the ringer of your children already being taken and placed into the state. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, but the 72-hour hearing, they do a really cool little, neat little trick to people. Those people who could not afford a lawyer, they get a court-appointed attorney, and that attorney does not get a hold of them to the night before the hearing, or they talk to them at the very hearing the next day. They get no preparation time with the attorney. They just plop it in the people's laps, and that
So that
hearing is so important.
Yeah, yeah, it is, and that's why it's also most important that as soon as you're dealing with CPS is to keep record, like Dennis said, is to record everything, verbally, also on paper, is to record everything and anything, because if there ever comes a chance that, God forbid anybody is placed in that situation, what there's going to be many, unfortunately, at least you'll be somewhat prepared because again, like I said before, they're not going to have a handbook out there and say, "Hey, guess what? We're going to protect you from, from us, from our own evilness." So always record everything. Keep copies, documents of your children's, whether they're in counseling, their schooling, doctors, whatever is going on. You have to document everything because if there is a chance that you have to go into a 72-hour hearing like that and say these court appointed lawyers are appointed to you, remember also that they're getting paid to go against you. They're supposed to be standing up for you, but they're paid through the courts regardless. They're not on your side. Neither is CPS.
No, they're never your friends. And tell people I've instructed people who luckily I was able to help before they got into the 72-hour hearing. I told them that if you wind up in that situation I just described, plead your right, use your right to remain silent, and tell the court, the judge, that you have not had adequate time for your representation to handle this situation. That's your best shot at the time to buy yourself time and gather yourself up to fight right away. If you can stop it early, that's the best thing to do. The earlier, the better that you stand and try to get this stuff dismissed, like you said, because it just turns into a big snowball that keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
And
And
you also had situations where after the children were taken, then they fabricated what they wanted to. This is another thing a lot of people deal with is having to witness their own children being abused in the system, or being medically neglected by the foster parents. You want to explain a little bit about that as well?
yes, thank you for kind of moving things along. Uh, but yeah, my oldest son, he when all the kids went into foster care. My oldest son was they were going to place him in an emergency shelter, but the family that took the girls wound up giving my son a place to temporarily stay. They took my at the time our 3-year old completely away from all family and placed him with a stranger. Placed him with a female. She was a single mom and a doctor, and he got cut off from family completely. And he didn't get to see anybody for over a month and a half before he finally got connection with family. But my oldest son, after he only had so much time with the family that took the girls, and then my sister somehow got him placed with her, but she was leaving him alone for extended periods of time with her then boyfriend who had a felony for child abuse and had a drug and alcohol problem, and he had mental health issues. So he was mixing and self medicating. So we raised a big stink, and they took my son out of her care and placed him in his first foster home. And he went there. It was held by an elderly lady, and she, at the time, we didn't find out till a little bit later, she had a major stroke just a couple months before our son got placed there, and she could not do housework. She couldn't drive anywhere, and her daughters would come to do things around the house. And our son was, from the moment our oldest son who's autistic, from the moment he went into foster care, the first 2 weeks of foster care, he slept in a crawl space because that was the only place that he would feel safe. And when he got placed in her home, about 2 months into being placed in her home, he started to show up at visitations with his hair horrible, his teeth not brushed. He looked sick. His clothes were always dirty. He was just an absolute mess.
So
So
she was a certified foster parent, are you saying? And she just basically
yeah,
neglected him all the way around.
she was a certified foster parent and what's called the level 2 foster parent, which means she had specialized training to handle kids with developmental disabilities.
And unfortunately, usually these people get paid a decent amount. I wouldn't say it's much, but it's a decent amount to put in your pocket for a month. And I think that kind of overrules their emotions on actually truly caring for these kids that really need the help. It kind of plays a
Um,
role.
that's something that I could point out here that not a lot of people know, and I did not know it until I ran crossed it on accident one day on the internet. Every the foster parents make anywhere between $80,000 to $100,000 a year. That's just their salary. I've got the list. You can go on the internet, look it up. It lists all the states and how much the salaries the foster parents make. And that's just their salary. So for 3 months is the average training for a foster parent. It can start out at $80,000 to $100,000 a year. Now
And that's
that doesn't include the maintenance payments for the kids.
or include the payment that the CPS workers received
Oh,
after taking
yeah.
the children. You know.
Oh yeah. 5 people from the moment the kids get took start making money. But getting back, sorry, I found that just it really ate my goat when I saw the foster parents' salary and stuff.
And with all that money they hand out to other people, wouldn't it be nice for them just to turn around and aid the parents? if they needed help with,
Yeah.
housing or food or what have you. It'd cost a lot cheaper probably, wouldn't it?
Yeah, early intervention would be ideal. But anyways, so we wound up. You exactly right. They were embezzling my son's payments from foster care each month. We wound up having to buy all his clothes, his jacket, winter jacket, his boots, his shoes, personal hygiene items. They did nothing for him. He got two hand-me-down suits of clothes, and that was it when he arrived at the foster home.
I've
So
learned
we,
through the years too, not to cut you off or anything, but I've learned through the years too that not only are they getting their own separate check, but these children actually get clothing vouchers while they're in the system. So there shouldn't even be any reason at all that he should have been neglected.
well, I can honestly say, not getting off topic, but 5 years my son spent in foster care. He got nothing but hand-me-down shoes, clothes. He never once, and he barely got to do much of anything. But anyways, getting back to it, so they were embezzling it. We were buying it, and then about the second month that he was at the foster home, the foster mother's daughter physically assaulted our son. She grabbed him behind the neck when he was carrying out garbage because they kept messing with him all the time, and he was one kept saying how he wanted to go home, wanted to go home. He said he was carrying out the garbage one night. She came out and grabbed him behind the neck by the arm and whipped him to the ground and mashed his face in the concrete and said, "You're going to know who your new family is." And he came into visitation and told us one night, the night it happened, like we had visitation a couple days after the incident, and we just went berserk. And we called the police department demanding investigations be done. CPS, they swept it under the carpet and claimed that it never happened. And even though we had a recording, we recorded the visitation, and it was in paperwork, and it was right there in front of their face. They just swept it and made it disappear. But we come to find out later on that our son was physically assaulted on a daily basis from between the foster mother and her daughters. So he started about he wound up being in that home for almost 9 months. And during that time period, he got to go somewhere. Maybe he got to go to church for 2 hours once a week. Besides that, he was locked in his room for pretty much the whole time. I think he said he got out maybe 3, 4 times. So, so yeah, it's the abuse is going on, and that was just the beginning of the road. But anyways, at about the 9 month mark, uh, there's so much to the story, but I like to focus in on the abuse and stuff. But at the 9 month mark, our son at that time period was just a mess. His therapist listed him as suicidal. He had instances at school where he threw his desk and slammed his head into a locker. He had uncontrollable fits of anger. He was pacing all day long, which is so for people who don't know autism, pacing is a coping mechanism for severe trauma. So individuals will pace all day long trying to deal with trauma that's
I think
being
the
done.
majority, Yeah, the majority of what you've already spoken that he's already went through, as far as mental health and behavioral, seems like a lot of it has to do with the trauma. I mean, he's been bounced around from place to place. Doesn't seem like anyone's paying attention to him physically or mentally for that matter. And it's great they could take him to church, but throw him back in a hole after he gets back, huh? It's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting, and people like that should be held accountable, and those are the ones that should be going to jail, actually.
I agree. And so, yeah, at the 9 month mark, he was just again showing up just horrible each visitation. And he wound up starting to cut himself. He turned into a cutter. And he came into visitation with cut marks all the way up his arm. And we made the visitation person mark it down on record. And I called up CPS. Again, they did nothing with it. His therapist was like, she kept sending emails to them talking to us about his bad state of mind and what he was in. And from there, they wound up, we made such a huge stink. We were actually, and that's where I can tell people that the best way to say it, CPS controls everything. They have their hands in police departments, schools. We called the numerous police departments during the course of our children's abuse, our oldest son's abuse in foster care, and each time we were shut down, and we got no help whatsoever, even though all the proof was sitting in front of them. But
Yeah, the police for some reason don't, I don't know why, because you would think it's part of their job description, dealing with child abuse and, situations like that. For some reason, they don't want to get involved. They steer people into going to family court, family court or child advocate centers in order to resolve the issue. But to me, it's just crazy. If you're showing proof, if you have doctors written out on it and there's clear signs of abuse, why wouldn't they get involved and press charges? So like you said, yeah, they have their hand in everything. And I think most importantly, what we need to understand is that this was from the very beginning planned to intentionally keep your child either, God forbid, incarcerated in the system itself, like say in a psychiatric ward, or God forbid in jail. And that's what they do to our children, is because they prepare their life to be mentally dysfunctional so then they can keep their hand in their pocket, because that's ultimately what their goal.
you're absolutely right in every way. If they can't, if your children are, and people can hear that out there, if your children are 5 years old or younger, you need to be real worried when they go into foster care, because that is their sweet spot, they call it, for adoption incentives. And if your kids are too old for adoption incentives and they don't stand much of a chance, like if they're near teenage years, like our oldest son was, just entering into teens, they do just like you said, they mess them up, and they mess them up and they wind up institutionalizing or keeping them after they age out and trapped. And it's a very bad situation. But anyways, so when he had all that going on, they wound up. We made such a big stink, and the school got involved, and people started emailing CPS and really crawling and breathing down CPS's neck. So they then took our son 2 hours from us and placed him in a group home. And it was a bad behavioral group home. And due to circumstances, and it take forever to uh, explain it out, but our son wound up becoming a ward of the state through circumstances. And they wound up When we found out they placed him 2 hours away from us, we went up to get him a care package at least. And we showed up at school and he came. They wound up calling him to the office. It wasn't by our choice because you got to be careful with contact and stuff that could show fits. But he came into the office just bawling and said that they told him he'd never see us again. And he was just flipping out. So he told us while we were talking to him, he told us that he was being, at the time, again, physically assaulted by some of the foster kids that were there. And the foster mom and dad were threatening him and threatening all the children that were at the foster home. So we again called the well child check, and CPS, because we made a stink at that home now, they wound up taking us, serving us with a restraining order for harassment and took out an injunction, which was we were not allowed to have contact with our son for 2 years.
So sounds like they retaliated against you for standing up for your son and what he was going through.
You know, both us and our son. Our son refused the entire time he was in foster care. He refused to conform to what they wanted him to do. He was a little warrior, but
He still is. He still is.
so after about we had issues come up, my health, my wife and I were victims of chemical contamination on a military installation, and she got stage 2 cancer, and I had gotten Parkinson's disease and 2 autoimmune diseases. And the toll, and I can tell everybody out there, parents take a horrible toll when their kids are in custody. Most parents have post-traumatic stress symptoms from day one of their children being taken, depression, anxiety, and their health, their jobs, everything takes a huge blow. And at the time the injunction was took out, our kids have been in foster care for about almost 3 years. And our health had just deteriorated so bad. I wound up being hospitalized. My wife battled. So for the first year of no contact with our oldest son, which was funny because we were these evil people with our oldest son, and they were claiming that we'd hurt him and everything, but during the whole time we had visitation with our youngest son, and there was no problems, nothing going on. So you think with an injunction and how bad injunctions are only to be taken out when under extreme circumstances, when there's such a huge threat on the child. But yet we were allowed visitation with our youngest boy like nothing ever happened over on his side. But so after about a year into the no contact, we wound up talking to some people. We kind of had people that we knew kind of keeping an eye out for him in the area. And they informed us that the situation only got worse after the injunction was took out. Our son, during the 2 years while he was in the group home, he wound up being mentally hospitalized for mental health 3 times. He was put on heavy antipsychotics medication to numb his emotions. That's one of the most common things is CPS will medicate the kids to cover their emotions. Like it kind of numbed up. That's one of the things that CPS does. But anyways, so we found that out, and we just after about a year into it, and not you at that time period. And that's something that I know every parent out there who has their kids in CPS custody, you worry about them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And when you're allowed no contact with them whatsoever, it just revs it up even worse and worse and worse. You're already, it's just horrible. It's inhumane. But we wound up having a weak moment, and after we found out that he was still being abused for a whole nother year severely, we wound up trying to take him to safety, and we wound up being criminally charged. And that's kind of where, like I said, there's a whole lot more to the story, but while we're here tonight is I wanted to get the point across that, because right now my wife has her pretrial conference next week on the 8th, and her trial at the end of the month. They've dragged this on. When we tried to take our son to safety, they charged us at first with federal kidnapping, served us up, supposedly arrested us for federal kidnapping. My wife and I, we spent 23 days in a federal holding facility, and they claimed that we were being extradited, but at the time we were living in Mississippi, but that we were being extradited to Wisconsin, we were told. But they took me off and messed me up so bad while I was in the holding facility that they couldn't transport me. They couldn't extradite me. So they left my wife and I walk out the front doors of that place on a signature bond for federal kidnapping and extradition papers. And a signature bond that we never seen nor signed for almost 8 months after they served it. They claimed that we were let out of the holding facility. So we didn't sign or see a signature bond. My wife, they've dragged this out now for 2 years after we got out of the holding facility. All of a sudden the federal kidnapping charges disappeared, and they charged us with child abduction on our son. And they dragged it out now for 2 years. Due to my health, and I'm the sole provider, and financially it benefits for my whole family. I hold everything. I had to cop and plea out a deal and take a felony charge they dropped it all the way from federal kidnapping down to interference with child custody, which is the lowest felony charge. And it's like they gave me a slap on the hand of 2 years of probation. But they're trying to sentence my wife to 22 years for child abduction. Murderers spend a quarter of that time. So we're trying to get the word out there to people
So you guys are looking for court watchers too, correct?
court watchers and people, like I said, I should have had the phone number and the email address that I posted all over.
Oh, I have it edited into the podcast, so people will be able to see that while it's in there.
We're asking people to please call the DA and make a stand on this, because this is happening. One of the biggest charges come when parents stand up. One of CPS's retaliations, and it's criminal charges. It's called fictitious litigant. I don't know if you ever heard of that. Fictitious, no. It means that the parents are trying to file and get the court in trouble, and they claim that they file, what's the word that I'm looking for? Just so many, because parents will do everything possibly to save their children, but they use all the filing, claiming that you're frivolously trying to get the courts charged and in trouble. So they issue what's called there's a felony.
Like a nuisance to the courts, basically.
Yes, and they've issued, and I've known people, they've issued felony charges, felony warrants for fictitious litigants. But that's, yes, CPS, no matter what you do, the more harder you fight, you're going to fight hard back. That's what I tell everybody. Knowledge is everything. But yeah, so we're asking people, and I didn't do a very good job, sorry, of presenting a whole lot today. There's just so much to it. But we're asking people to call in and support for my wife. And if they can, the court watch. Yeah, we need court watchers on February 8th. She's got to be in person if it goes to trial in the end of February. So we're going to try to get that on Facebook Live and through several streaming shows.
Yeah, so anybody that's watching with the link that we're going to have attached in the podcast, I believe I have it attached. If it's not attached in here, I know I had attached it in the prior post for scheduling, but I will go in and make sure that it is in there by the end of the night. There is the information in there for them, along with the hearing date and time. Yes, Dennis, if you go Facebook Live, it would be great because then we can have a few other people that can post as you're Facebook Living and send to groups, and hopefully help out. Do you guys have a lawyer at hand?
No, my wife is all of a sudden, after having a public defender since we got out of the holding facility, they claim that she doesn't qualify for a public defender now. Right at the end when they're pushing her to trial, we spent $10,000 on one of the best supposed criminal lawyers out there, and he wound up doing nothing but just push it along for 2 years. Took off with the money. So we tried to get her a public defender again, and they said we didn't qualify.
So
So
she's pretty much going in there solo by herself.
yeah, she's being forced to represent herself.
Wow. Wow. If they're not trying to set her up for failure. So that's another thing, guys. Let's please try to spread the word as fast and as much as we can. They really need their help and they need justice. Most importantly.
But to those listening out there, believe people always call us conspiracy theorists. They'll tell you that you're a disgruntled parent, but this stuff is for real, and no one is safe from it out there. It doesn't matter how much money you have. Everybody from Megan Walsh to Sarah Palin, they've all had their children taken from CPS. So it's a real thing out there, and the abuse that's going on in these foster homes and group homes is real as well.
It's trafficking. It's trafficking our children for money, for themselves, unfortunately, and they take advantage. Um, I've said this before that I really do truly believe, and it's not a conspiracy to me, but I believe it that they are intentionally pegging certain families out for a reason because the majority of the time, like I said before, these are families that have already been taking care of their children. Their kids were already well financially and educational, mental, whatever aspect in life a child's supposed to be covered, they were covered with their parent. And prior to them taking them, they didn't have these issues.
Yeah.
Once the child is taken, they're put into situations to where they're either sexually or physically abused, they're mentally abused, they're not getting the proper medical treatment. In the meantime, CPS looks at us as if to say, "Well, who are you to correct us because we took your children from you?" And parents get very scared and timid when they speak with CPS because they think that they don't have to stand up for their rights, which you can very well stand up for your rights and play them at their own game at the same time. Um, Again, you have to educate yourself. We have to educate ourselves. We're the parents. We can't leave it up for everybody else to teach us how to be a parent and how to protect.
Yes, and that's something that I'll confirm. Uh, it's all about that adoption incentive. They they need kids coming from real bad situations, have behavioral problems, My honest opinion is they target middle class families with children. Their children are brought up correctly. They're taught to respect their elders. They they're good merchandise to get those adoption incentives. They don't want, you know what I mean?
Yeah, most definitely. Again, we're going to speak about basically corrupting their minds so they are influenced and manipulated into the system. That's pretty much what it is. It keeps the money train going. And we spoke about that, last week, and it's very true. It's awful and it's true. And don't ever think for one instance if you contact CPS, you are contacting the enemy. They are not your friends. No matter what they offer you, no matter what they say, trust and believe there is a motive behind it, and it's not in your favor.
I agree. And we're living proof of it.
Yep, and it shouldn't have to take people to, go through it in order to trust and believe that we are standing up for what's right, and we're trying to express to you guys and expose to you that it is very real. So please wake up and realize that they're out there and they will continue to harass and they will continue to try and take their children. And ultimately, they're the ones that hurt in the long run. We do as parents, yes, but they're the ones that hurt in the long run. We got to start standing up. And I did just come up with a new group. I know there's a lot of CPS groups out there against CPS groups. So one is CPS Caught in Action, and I had specifically came up with that group so people can understand that you can record them. I know you have to look at what state you're in, and if it's a second party, you have that right. If you do have that right, record everything and put it online. They're full aware of us starting to stand up. They're full aware of that. So once these people start realizing that we're not playing and we're going to put them on blast on Facebook, we're going to see how some of them are going to think about their jobs or maybe even quit for that matter or maybe go against the people that they're standing with. But we got to start putting them on blast and explaining to them that we're the parents. They're not our kids' parents. We're the parents.
Yeah, I
Um,
was going to say something quick. It doesn't matter if you're a two party or one party state. If they're on your legal residence and you're on your property, you're allowed to record everything. It's your constitutional right.
Yeah, most definitely. Before we close out, is there anything else that you wanted to say, either for yourself or on your wife's behalf?
Well, so just right now, our son, let you know, like I said, it was to people out there. It's only my second time on a live show, so but our oldest son wound up, he's currently almost 20 years old, and he's trapped in adult foster care. We're fighting to get him out of it while we were being charged criminally and them dragging out the criminal process. They conveniently got him assigned a guardian for this by the state, and he's being held against his will. And we're still, due to all the legal stuff, we weren't allowed to have contact with him. So we still have yet to. We saw him one time in like 3 years now. So the situation, I just ask people out there, call the number, email, give an email, and please help out. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dennis, for being a part of your show and also expressing to everybody, the true corruption that's going on. And I really hope and pray that you guys get the help that you need. Please, please don't hesitate. I know it's exhausting, but don't hesitate to go to many other people. Get your voice out there. Get your son's story out there. Everyone needs to hear what's truly going on. It's just beyond corruption in so many different ways. It's terrible, and people do need to understand that justice needs to be served. Justice definitely needs to be served. So, with that being said, thank you so much, Dennis, for being a part of the show. I will try to contact you later on, and we could talk a little bit more. Everybody, please share. Also, look at the links that are going to be attached to the podcast for them, and continue to share. Reach out to them if you need to, if you have any questions. Um, and thank you so much. The Tina Salinas here for We Are the Voice for the Silence and Afflicted. Have a good night, guys.